Okay, so we've made a system that puts a cylinder at the beginning of the curve, but we want that cylinder to be a pot. So let's reshape this thing. So take the cylinder, and first of all, let's go into wireframe mode so we can see, add some resolution to this. So it's a bit more circular, and add some side segments. I would go to something like 50, because we're gonna really be manipulating the geometry. And speaking of manipulating geometry, every time we're moving around points, we use a set position node, and the name of the game is gonna be expanding this on the X and y-axis radially, or spherically in a sense, to kind of mimic the shape of a pot. To do this, I'm going to take the position and I'm going to separate out the z component. So we're basically going to make this go bigger and smaller, so it'd kind of be bigger up in this area. It would be kind of curved down here to make a lip. We're going to do that based on how up and down we are on the z-axis, right? So if we take the z-axis and we do a map range, because remember, the way this is working right now is the cylinder has a depth, or in other words, a height of 2. So it's going from, if we look at just the cylinder, it's going from -1 to 1. So I want the 0 to 1 gradient. The way we can do that is we can take this map range, map from -1 to 1 to 0 to 1, which means if we now take the position and we run a vector math, so I'm going to take our position and I'm going to multiply it by a custom vector. That vector is going to be one where we can control the x, y, and z. Z is going to be unchanged, and x and y is going to be subject to this. When we connect this, you can see it's pinching at the bottom because z is equal to 0 in our remapping. And then it's increasing up to 1. And again, it's only modifying the x and y components. So now we're gonna kind of have to reshape this in a sense. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this map range result, and probably the easiest way to do this is send it through an RGB curves. So you can see this diagonal line kind of matches the diagonal line of this. If I curve it, it will curve. So to make a pot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bring this up so it kind of has a diagonal thing. And at some point we need kind of a harsh transition, something like that, to make it more of a pot. I would recommend setting these handles to linear, which makes them more angled. And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm kind of shaping this hardcore lip here. Probably the first time you heard hardcore lip in a Blender tutorial. Do something like that. And then I'm also going to add a point at the base here. And just add a bit of curvature. And then flatten it up at the top. And the idea of this is you can see it's kind of subtle, but it's making a bit of a curve here, a bit of a lip. And I think that's pretty good for our pot shape. You could get a bit more complicated, right? You could add like a point here and it caves in. Maybe let's actually do that. I'm going to add a couple points and then a point in the middle and have a bit of a dip. This is just to add some extra detail to our thing. And again, make sure to set some of these that you want to be linear to linear. So I'm just resetting these. And now we have a more complicated looking pot. I think the last thing we want to do is we want to kind of give this thing thickness and separate the top component. So in the next part, let's separate this top component and then do the extrusion.